This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Share my with everybody, and welcome. He is leading another call. So she is not with us today, but Jennifer Courtney is joining us, and so we're very excited to have her here, adding to the conversation. Excited to see some familiar faces coming back to join us. So for those of you who maybe this is your first time on the book club, hopefully that encourages you that this is a welcoming place and people keep coming back. We have changed up our format a little bit the past 1 week at a time, and we went through the Exordium and had some really great conversations because we are emphasizing to our incoming Challenge A tutors that working through the naturals is the best preparation for Challenge A, beginning with complex in the fall. We are going to be going through 1 through 30 in 15 weeks. So that means we're going to do 2 weeks each, 2 lessons, 2 booklets each week, so that everybody has the opportunity to feel well equipped before jumping into community come August or September. So it's going to be a little bit different format, but hopefully the same great conversation. For everybody, your best place to ask your questions. So please feel free to put those in the chat. And we will also have pauses where you can just jump in and share what your questions are. So please feel free to participate. All right, so we are going to go through pages 1 through 4 of the curriculum. And at the end of today, we'll talk about why we're emphasizing pages 1 through 4 of each week. And we are going to start off by looking at each page together. And I want you to consider what is familiar and what is familiar. And feel free to speak up and say, this feels familiar to me, or this is something that is unfamiliar to me. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment while you guys talk.
The first third is familiar, and that it's talking about the booklet cover, which is what we've covered in the last, book clubs. So that is very familiar. It looks like something we would have done.
Good.
This is my first math map experience. So this is all unfamiliar to me, but I'm excited to jump in and learn.
Okay, so I'm going to piggyback off of that, and I'm going to encourage you to find something that's familiar. What language is it written in?
Okay, so what's familiar is the color scheme is very CC-esque. The logo I see this looks very CC to me, the colors. That's familiar.
Good. So colors feel familiar, right? We've seen these colors before. The layout and some of the things feel like CC. And just the fact that you're speaking English, I'm guessing that you read English, so the language is familiar, right? And so I want to encourage everybody, when we talk about finding things that are familiar, it is okay to be granular. And what I mean by that is that when we're talking with our students and they look at a page and they go, I can't do this, right? Say, okay, just look at that top line there that Donna pointed out. It says the booklet cover. Do you guys know what a booklet is? Right, that's a familiar idea. Do you know what a cover is? Okay, well, I'm familiar with that. What am I unfamiliar with? I really don't necessarily understand what that means when I'm talking about the curriculum itself. And so we want to go granular. And Donna knows this from when when she was one of my students in the master's class, because they went through exercise with the math map, and I would make them dive deep into, right, find the smallest thing. Do you know what the numbers are? Can you read the numbers, right? And then build from that and say, okay, if I know what booklet means, now how can I build on that to say, what does it mean in context of the math map? So not picking on you, but I just want to encourage us all to realize that we know more than we think we know, right? So when we're looking at things, it's really tempting to be turned off and think, I don't know any of this. And I've had that experience myself, believe me. There are times in my math work when I'm doing some of the math, oh, that's just too much, and we want to shut down. I really want to encourage you to find one little nugget that you say, well, I know what that word is, or I know what that number is, and then build from there. So there's no judgment. When I ask you what's familiar, there's no judgment. That was perfect to say it looks like CC. That was really a perfect answer. So thank you. All right. I want to point out that the cover of the booklet is the Exordium. And I'm not showing you that. I'm not going to step through the curriculum today, because what I'm stepping through are the lesson pages that you would be doing. But if you have downloaded this at home, to do at home, you have a copy of the cover, and you should see on that there is an artwork, there is a quotation, and there is a reflection that is on there. And we are attempting to help through words and images to those ideas of the week. And so it's really tempting, isn't it, for those of you who were here last year, to pull up a copy of the cover and go through this, because it's so rich. But what we're doing this year is a little bit different. And so I would encourage you to go back and watch our past episodes to see what those exordia look like in the math map. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and look at page 2. And we're in lesson 1, and I want to point out to you that right now, does this look, I'm asking you an unfamiliar question here. Does this look like a math book that you would expect it to look like on day 1?
No.
Right. So when we're thinking of math books, this may feel unfamiliar. And so what I want to point out is that ex nihilo, many different purposes. One of the primary purposes this year of ex nihilo, the first booklet, is to introduce everybody to the parts of the curriculum. And so as you look at the lesson pages 1 through 16, those lesson pages are going to pull out some key aspects of the curriculum. So the first one we wanted to talk about was the cover. On page 2, we're talking about the inside front cover, and we're calling that the contribution to the conversation. The contribution to the conversation, right? When we hear conversation, is that a familiar word? Where does CC encourage these conversations to take place?
In community.
In community and
And at home.
Families.
At home.
home and at home, right? So what we're talking about is inviting conversation. One of the greatest compliments I think that the math map received on in our piloting, we had one of our pilot tutors come and spend some time with us to wrestle with what we were preparing them to lead through. It was not as nice as it is now, so they had to do a lot of wrestling. But as we talked through the math map, she had tears in her eyes as she said, I feel as though I'm finally being invited into a conversation that has been closed to me all of my life. And so we are really trying to emphasize this invitation to everybody into the mathematics conversation. That's cover is intended to do is to be that invitation. Because not everybody may be ready to have that conversation, we've included one possible contribution to the conversation. And notice the article A, right? Right? So it says a contribution, not the contribution, right? So this is just one person's idea of how you may take those elements from the cover and connect them to introduce the ideas of the week. And so that contribution is there for the tutor to use as preparation, for a parent to use as preparation, or for a student to read to get another idea. But that is the purpose of that contribution. And as Jill says, right, it is a contribution. It's not taking charge or being the only things that we can discuss. So that is a supportive piece of the curriculum there. And we're encouraging people, right, that is really not to be read in community. It's for use at home or for preparation. Is there anything on this page that somebody wants to point out as being familiar or unfamiliar?
I can talk about the what do you call it? The unseen number scheme where she's multiplying by ones. And it took me right back to when we read The Number Devil as a family. And my oldest, who's now 21, we first seen those little patterns, and that exact chart is right from The Number Devil. And I was like, oh, that is my favorite book ever. And it's right in here on the first page. So that to me was exciting, because now I realize I have permission to bring back those other books that we used to love and I just never had time for, because we got so busy into Saxon and just doing the things. We kind of shelved those books and put them away. So now I have a place for them in that unseen booklet.
I love that, Deanna. I love that you said you have permission to do more than just work through the problems, right? And a lot of the times when we think, right, we even say it, we say, do the math. What do we mean when we say do the math?
Do the problems.
Calculate.
Calculate. Is there more to math than calculation?
Much more.
Data has discovered that, right? There's so much more. When we think of mathematics, there's so much more than calculation. And the wonder and the beauty and the truth and the goodness of mathematics is present in the calculation, but it may feel more accessible when we look at things like these patterns, right? These patterns are amazing. And when we go, God embedded all of this in the way our universe works, it's not man-made, right? We didn't sit there and make that happen. That it's revealing this incredible detail of our creation. So I love that, Deanna, that you absolutely have permission now to approach math with awe and wonder and not drudgery of calculation. Right. Let's look at page 3. What is familiar or on this page?
I've ridden that ride before at the bottom of the page. I probably only wrote it once because I'm sure it made me sick.
Well, that is my daughter on the far left with her really good friend. And I won't tell you that my other child is in there because he would really not like it if people knew that that was him. But they would ride that particular version of that is the Beetle Bounce at Legoland. And they would ride that time after time after time after time. They would get off and run around and get back on again. So, yes. But I never have, Babs, so you're a step ahead of me.
I just see that title in the middle, the ex nihilo, thinking about nothing. And I'm like, yeah, I do that quite often.
I got a chuckle out of the questions section there, because when it said, can we count nothing? I was ready to write at this point. we're in a math book, I feel like I should be writing. So I was like, oh, here's a question I can write. So I wrote not really. And then I immediately was reminded that over Christmas, when I had scheduled a cookie decorating party, I discovered I was out of food coloring, so can I count nothing? Yes, I had no food coloring. And it was really important for me to count that nothing before people showed up.
A really good point. When you start thinking about nothing a little bit more deeply, it changes. So Babs, you said that picture was familiar, and I saw some other people nodding, right? Even if you think about just a ride, right? The idea that you took your kids to an amusement park. So we see this picture that feels familiar. Is thinking about it mathematically, like there are 7 people and I can count by 2s to see 14 legs, or seeing it as a number line, is that perhaps an unfamiliar idea to take something amusement park and look at it mathematically?
Yeah, that's not something that I do all the time, is think about math while I'm at an amusement park. Well, I should say, when I'm at an amusement park, I do think about math when I'm calculating how much money I'm spending while at this amusement park. But that might be the only math I feel like I'm thinking about. There probably is more out there.
I was going to say, similar to Babs, that I think sometimes we do think in terms of math. We just don't stop and say, oh, I'm thinking math. Kids might be thinking, oh, I'll probably be 2 rides away. Or, there's more people on this side than that side. Or if I double up here. So I think that we are thinking math, but we haven't been taught to count that as thinking math. And so we don't think we really did it yet. We still don't think we're thinking math, but we are.
I love that, Jill.
Right. And we're thinking, how high is this thing going? And how fast is it going to go? And what is its deceleration or acceleration going to be? Or I love that question at the bottom, where would the screen fall on the decibel scale? My Apple Watch will tell me that. Like, that's all of that's math.
What's the probability that I survive this ride?
Exactly.
Like the angle of the fall.
Yes. As you can see, I am not a thrill seeker ride rider. So yes. I love the fact that we're talking about this image and the seeing the unseen, because even though we're not talking about that a lot today, we're really looking at the top boxes. In Ex Nihilo, those bottom boxes there are designed to give you ideas for what could go in your student Seeing the Unseen booklet, which is a blank booklet that they have for week 29. And the goal is for them to hopefully, maybe not the first year, but hopefully develop the habit of saving things that demonstrate how they've seen the unseen through mathematics. And so it may be that really cool pattern that we saw on the last page, or it may be a picture from the amusement park. And they're going to save these pieces up and they're going to stick them in this book. And it is a student book, especially by the time they get to challenge, right? Younger students may have a little bit more mom involvement. But I really want to emphasize for everybody who's listening that it is not intended to be a parent project. It is not intended to be perfect. It is not intended to be, beautiful in the way that it's laid out, but that it is supposed to reveal truth, beauty, and goodness of mathematics. And so I don't know if Babs or Jill want to speak to that and how that has been experienced in their classes when students do this Seeing the Unseen booklet.
I
So,
can.
You go first, and I'll go after you.
I was just going to say that it does take a little bit of time to warm up to it. And it takes an adult or a person who's done math before pointing things out, or even saying, hey, that would be a great thing to put in your Seeing the Unseen booklet. And sometimes even getting them to have the energy required to actually take that great idea and write down the sentence in the Seeing the Unseen booklet, and letting them know it doesn't have to fill a whole page. One great idea that they did, or even not great idea, a joke that someone told, or even a whatever, some kind of connection that they saw. If they say, oh, hey, look, there's the right number of candy for everyone in our class. Guys, that can go in the Seeing the Unseen book. Just something to kind of get them going. And then after a few weeks, when you're doing all the different things we're doing in learning, more math starts to come because of our practice with seeing art every week, and our practice with looking for those hidden ones and hidden zeros and what's familiar, what's unfamiliar. So we're modeling it every week, every day, hopefully, with the way we talk. And so when we say that would be a great thing a few times, after a while, they start saying to each other and to us, hey, that would be a great thing. And we never say, no, that doesn't fit. We always say, yes, that would be a great thing to add.
I think what I've loved seeing during the pilot is being able to see the creativity of the students, because I don't always think of math as a creative place, a place, where you can just let your creative juices flow. But this is a project where they can, if they're artists and they love to draw, then they can draw those things, there. Or if they like to do artsy, crafty things, they can cut things out and paste them in. And so really it can be geared toward whatever the student wants. And I have loved seeing just the variety of what students bring in, because I have shown them one that I did like a couple of years ago. And so it's probably like kind of outdated and it's not that great, just so that they'll like try to show me up, and make it look so much cooler than the one I made. And they do. It's just, there was one kid, like he was an amazing artist, and the detail that he was able to show in his Seeing the Unseen booklet, it was awesome. So I think just being able to see, the variety of like the students' skills and what they can bring to the table, and that I just haven't been able, I haven't seen that in math before. So I just like it that it gives them that opportunity to do that in the math portion.
Thanks. Donna, I love your answer there, right? It's great if they can add to it along the way. The reality is that for some students, it's at the end, and that's okay. That's okay. So back to page 3, the math map, which is the grid document that is included every week, because we always want to emphasize to students knowing where they are, reflecting where they've been, and looking to where they're going. So the math map is all about finding these connections and really being able to know where I am on my mathematics journey. And so students will have the opportunity to do that every week. And our last page of lesson 1, page 4, is talking about flashcards. So I'm going to speak about flashcards, and then we'll come back to familiar and unfamiliar. And Leigh will tell you that the flashcards are perhaps the most important thing that you can do with your students. And one thing that I have embraced, especially over the last year to 18 months, is remembering that we are in the trivium of our children's education, right? That what we're doing K through is the trivium. We're teaching our children the arts of grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric. We're equipping them with the 15 classical tools or skills of learning. That's our focus. And we're using really great content in order to teach them how to learn. When you look up and research the trivium is all about language and being able to use language effectively in order to communicate with others or to learn any other thing, right? When we look at the quadrivium is our study of these mathematical ideas, arithmetic and geometry and so forth. So we become that's where the math really becomes the focus. We are using the math map to use arts of the trivium and to help students learn the language of mathematics so that they can study any branch of mathematics that they want to. Are they going to learn math? Absolutely, right? And that starts with learning the grammar. And all of us know, right? My daughter's in her first year of college, and she was cleaning out her bag while, when she was home, and she handed me, I don't need, and they were flashcards that she'd made for one of her classes, right? So she learned from Cece the value of flashcards and is now making her own. And so we are creating flashcards that go along with the math map. In addition to the computation facts of addition and multiplication, we're also developing notation flashcards, fraction flashcards, and more. And that's the best way to load the grammar. And if Leigh was here, she'd be telling you, do your flashcards before you do your lesson pages. And so every page, you're going to notice that the first page of each day has a little box that says flashcards. And that's to remind everybody the importance of loading the grammar in, and using flashcards is one of the best ways we can do that. Okay. So we have 4 minutes before we have to move on to lesson 2. So feel free to share something that is familiar or unfamiliar on this page, or what questions do you have that have come out of what we've talked about so far?
Well, I'm seeing versions of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, now the way these pages are put together has become familiar. There's 3 sections, they're always the same. And so starting to see that familiarity and the simplicity of it is refreshing.
With doing flashcards with my younger 6-year-old, some people have felt like there wasn't enough writing if they were just copying and tracing. So I just started having him take a blank sheet of paper, stick in sand, and copy the flashcard down and put his answer. So it takes more time than traditional flashcards, but then he's getting that that sensory writing it down and all of that. We can't do that every day for time, but it is definitely a way to tell people that you can get more writing in with just the flashcards.
I love that. Flashcards are so, I'm trying to think of the word, like different things with flashcards. We used to play all kinds of games with flashcards when my 2 were still learning at my knee instead of independently. So that's a great point. And the addition and multiplication flashcards are computation facts, and they are the existing decks that already exist. So if you have used the addition or multiplication flashcards, they are not changing. We're adding 2 more sets this year and more to come.
On one of the pages, does it have a list of the words that if you're making your own flashcards? I think that's what I haven't seen.
We do not have necessarily here, you will not see today or in the naturals where you may pull those words from. In the full curriculum, there are 4 pages every week called the charts. Those charts are the grammar for the entire curriculum. So they're kind of like Henley's grammar if you're a challenge parent and you have that little grammar book that's got all the things you need to know kind of crammed in there. That's what the charts are. They are the full scope of the math map and have all the details of the math. So that may be a place where you would pull from to say, okay, we're going to make a flashcard for this piece of grammar. And which of these words, the familiar, which of those things that we identify would make good flashcards?
If you ask that again, you kind of blipped out for a minute.
Sure.
In the middle of your question.
When we're looking at a page and identifying things that are familiar or things that are unfamiliar, which of those would be a good hint for us to use as our flashcards?
What's unfamiliar?
Right? What's unfamiliar? So any page that I look at and I go, don't know what they mean by sum, right? So we have a sentence here that says the sum of anything and 0 does not change the number. And it may be that you go, I don't remember what sum means. So I may look at my chart, or I may go to the glossary and find out what the word sum means, because I know that I was unfamiliar with, that may be a great word for me to make a flashcard of. Right? So this exercise of familiar and unfamiliar is going to help us to identify the things that we want to make our own flashcards for. All right, I am going to go ahead. I sort of did that, but are there any final questions before we launch into lesson 2?
So those 4 pages you just showed us are not in the beta version, correct? That's available?
No, it is now. So previously we did not share the ex nihilo, but we have now. So
okay.
In our latest update, we have shared those pages with you. Yes.
Thank you.
And if you get the rest of the pages and you go through, you're going to see it's going to introduce you to all the other parts of the curriculum as well. Okay, lesson 2. Let's take a minute and what is familiar and what is unfamiliar about this page.
Well, I see bold print and then I see like less bold print. So I know the things that maybe I'm supposed to write or trace, or have my student write or trace, or blanks too. That's familiar.
Excellent.
The word Euler diagram is new. It's unfamiliar.
Unfamiliar.
One thing I like about this page is the combination of all the ways that you can keep track of something on one page. I've never seen a math curriculum that does that. And I think that is so cool. Like even the tally marks are on there. I don't know. I love this page for that reason. And I last year I was directing challenge 4, and this year I'm back in challenge B. And even the grammar of being able to say what are some of these symbols on here, they've gotten so used to just not thinking about what they're doing and just quickly finishing a problem and getting an answer. And when you stop and say, oh, what is this called or whatever, they have to like really think about it and sometimes don't come up with the answer. And here all this is on this one page at this young age. I just think this is, I just love it so much. It's brilliant.
Christy,
I
you
think
just
it's a
pointed
nice.
out, right? By comparing, we can take the familiar and the unfamiliar and decode what they mean. Sorry, I stepped on somebody. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that was exactly what I was about to say, only not as succinctly. But down at the very bottom where we see the square root of 4, and then we see 4 represented by dots. I think that adding a visual element to square roots, and all a young child needs to do is match the 4. And the parent can say, yep, that's a square root symbol. They can call it a radical if they've gotten that far.
Right.
But they can just say, oh, I can recognize this. This is where I can start. And I think that's something CC has done well over the years, is give more information, focus on something that's approachable. And then when they get to the table for the big kids, they've already seen that fork.
I like your analogy there, Jill. So good. So you guys are noticing this pattern, right? Does this feel more familiar as a math page?
Yeah.
It does, right? So at week 1, for those of you who are maybe tutors or product sales specialists and are answering questions from parents, and they look at booklet 1 and they go, well, where's the math? 1, it's in there, but you can also tell them, just wait till next week and you're going to see things that look familiar, math types of exercises.
have a quick question that may be a little off topic, but just looking at the page, what font is used for the tracing? Because I noticed that the midline is closer to the top line than being in the middle. So that just looks a little different to me.
So we're working on getting together some more detail on the fonts for people who have those questions. I can tell you that we had this conversation probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I don't remember all the details at the time because my focus was on the math, not necessarily on the fonts. For the script, for the cursive, we use the same font that is used in the prescripts, and the font that is used for other things was chosen, I think, to support an entree into that. I know there are all kinds of reasons that we are, as I said, we're working on getting some more detail to that. One thing I could tell you that Leigh shared was when they were thinking about this, that most children are time sort of with straight lines instead of nice, neat curves. And so, for example, with the 3, that was one of the reasons why they chose to go with that 3 instead of the double curve 3. But I do want to emphasize that the goal is not handwriting through the math map. That the goal here is one more way to support learning the grammar. And so we will eventually see more copy work, but for our younger students, it's more tracing. Again, less because of the developing the handwriting style and more as a way to load the grammar. So,
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
No, there's no bad questions. Please ask away. So when we look at this, one thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that the math map is organized by dimension. And so lessons 1 and lessons 2 are 0 dimension. And up in the top left corner, you'll see that we say that a point has 0 dimensions and 0 is a natural number. So some of you may have heard that 0 is not a natural number. It is not a universal truth, unlike it may be a universal truth about a rich man in need of a wife, right? This is not a universal truth. It is something that needs to be defined. And so we are defining it for the math map that 0 is a natural number. It just works out better for us. It doesn't really change anything. It just makes things a little bit simpler, the way that we have structured the scope, the sequence of the curriculum. And so we're being very clear with everybody that 0 is defined in our natural numbers. When we think of 0D, we mean that there's no dimension, right? There's no direction, there's no measurement, there's no comparison, there's no operations. So all we're going to talk about in lessons 1 and lessons 2, really, we're going to be emphasizing just the characteristics of number. And so as I can't remember who it was that pointed out, right? We're looking at all the different ways I can represent number here using different types of numerals. Okay, so numerals are our concrete representation of that abstract idea of number, and that's what we're seeing on this page. All right. On page 2 of lesson 2, what is familiar and what is unfamiliar?
Something
Well, there's
sorry.
I love the rhino.
I'm sorry.
I will share that with Leigh because that was her specific addition.
I see the seasons, they're familiar.
I think the money and then the coins and then the geometric shapes. the pictures of things that kids might recognize with the bike and the trike and the unicycle. And then just the different ways of numbers. You have ordinals, and then you have the numerals and Roman numerals. And I love that there is the theta and vectors that we are, and the infinity sign that we are thinking about. I mean, I think about that when we're getting to those higher levels of math too. And again, I just love how those later things are introduced here, and that idea of having those become so familiar and so comfortable, that it won't be a big deal later. It's just so brilliant. I love it.
Do we expect any of our students at this point in the year, if they haven't seen this, do we expect them to understand what a vector is?
No.
Do we expect them to understand what a factorial is?
No.
As parents, are we going to sometimes have to fight with ourselves to avoid explaining these ideas the first time we see them?
Yes. Huge challenge. Yeah.
It is, right? So I just want to acknowledge that, right? When we talk about a factorial, the goal here is for students to go factorial and exclamation point. These two ideas go together. That's enough, right? That's enough grammar. It means it's unconnected and I don't understand it, right? That's enough grammar for them the first time around. And we're going to layer and scaffold till eventually they're going to be able to calculate factorials, and they're going to be able to identify where factorials are used to solve bigger problems, right? So yes, we just have to be careful as parents, because we want to jump in and be dialectic, and sometimes give our students the room to be grammarians. And I addressed this on our last page. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this page here is all about emphasizing the difference between number and numeral, because a number is an abstract idea and a numeral is a concrete representation of that number. And so we might have the coins, or the numerals, or the words, the Roman numerals, or the tally marks, right? Any of those, if I told you I needed you to know the number, I could use any one of those and you'd go, oh, she must mean 3. Right? If I said, what number am I thinking about? So that is the emphasis of this page, and it will be the emphasis of this page for the natural students, and it will be the emphasis of this page for the fraction students, and the emphasis of this page for our challenge students, and the emphasis of this page for our expression students, right? So every student that's working on this page is going to be going back and really looking at what does it mean to be a number versus what does it mean to be a numeral. Okay, page 3. What is familiar and what is unfamiliar on this page?
For most people, seeing that 100, 10, and unit blocks would be familiar, but seeing it written with an exponent might be unfamiliar.
Those unit
Hands are
blocks remind
familiar.
me of Matthew C. When my boys were little, we used Matthew C. and they had the number 100 block and the little blocks. That's what it reminds me of that.
So Jill, I love that you pointed out, right? We're taking something that may be familiar and connecting it to something that may be unfamiliar.
The word decimal is familiar to me, but I don't really think about it as being defined as using 10 digits. I think of it more as, oh, it's like a fraction, but without the bar. But decimal actually means there are 10 digits involved in what you are doing.
I see skip counting at the bottom.
And in the middle.
Our very first calculator is there. our 10 digits.
So I want to point out that somebody said when we were looking at lesson 1, they said, I'm becoming familiar with the fact that there's 3 sections on every page. And I'm going to just click back here. How many sections are there on this page? 2. How many on this page? 2. How many on this page? 1. Big section, right? And what was the thing that's familiar is that it's these bars, right? It's easier to see here, right? There's a bar at the top and there's a bar in the middle. And then here we just have 1 bar at the top. And so even though we're only on lesson 2, right? Hopefully you're starting to notice that the pages are, right? We've got these sort of signposts that separate out key on the page. Right? So there's one more way to feel familiar and say, okay, I think everything on this page is talking about place value. That's its title. So this is all about place value. One of the things we want to do as we go through the naturals is just to hit on some of the big ideas of each week that this page talks about positional number systems, meaning that the place that the digit is in determines its value. So the Roman numerals, it doesn't matter if there's 10 Roman all put next to each other to make a number, we have to add and subtract to figure out what that number is. And they're not determined, right? Each one doesn't have a specific value. When we think of the Hindu numerals, they all have a specific value based on where they are. And so that's the idea that we're introducing students to here, right? Is that if you're the rightmost digit, you have, let me see if I can turn my pointer on. Laser pointer, right? If I'm the rightmost digit, right, I'm worth 1. So if there was a 3 there, it would be worth 3 1s. If I'm next to the left, it's worth 10. So if I had a number like 30, that would have been 0 1s and 3 10s. And if I had 300, now I had 0 1s and 0 10s, but I have 3 of these, which is 300, right? So I have 300s, which makes our 300. And so where the digit is matters. And that's what it means by a positional number system. That's what it means by place value, right? Those locations are called places. And when we're talking about decimal, as Jana pointed out, there's 10 digits. And so we call it base 10. And that's what determines how much each place is worth. So that's a lot to fit in here because we're not really talking about it here, but we're just leading up to that. So over the years, students are going to see a little bit more of what that means. And eventually they'll understand how place value works, right? But we're going to build it slowly. Young students being introduced to ideas that are building up to where we're headed. And let's look at page 4. And how about this page? Is this a page that is full of familiar or full of unfamiliar ideas?
Mostly unfamiliar.
I'll admit, sounds more like chemistry than math. And I'm familiar with subset, but superset is newer.
So this is Yating Heller from Indiana, and I'm looking at your screen for the natural, but I'm also opening up my complex. And the question is it page 4 always corresponding to page 4?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So because I can see in the complex, we're dealing with set, but it is almost like a quadruple more complex than the natural, but it's the same concept. So every booklet at every level, every domain, the page number is going to correspond to each other.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
maybe everybody knows this, but some might not have exposure. This that we're looking at is meant for like 6-year-olds, right? Kirsty, is that approximately? This is the 6-year-old version of the math map. And the complex that you were just referring to is for our Challenge A students. That's the print.
Yeah. And yet it's so beautiful because I also see two brown color bar on the complex. And then also the bars, are they going to be also comparable? So I see two pink bars. Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm glad that she had the complex out, because I have the complex out too. And I was looking and I was thinking, how awesome will it be for that Challenge A kid to go trace this page first before they get to this page? And then when we have access to the fractions, even looking at the fractions page before they get to this one, to see, the different level of complexity. But, tracing this page first will just set them up for what they see in this complex level.
Yeah, and imagine when we have these all rolled out and a student has been working in the math map for 6 years before they hit Challenge A. All right. Isn't that exciting to think about? They'll really know these ideas. They'll have the grammar. And just imagine if you had all the math grammar at your fingertips, right? What does that mean for developing understanding? If you're a family that went through foundations and you had memorized all of those Latin endings, right? And all you knew them as were songs, right? We didn't know, the kids don't know anything else. They're just like, ah, right? And then all of a sudden you're sitting in a Challenge A classroom and you open up Henley and your tutor goes, we're going to decline these nouns, and they write and you go, oh, right, we've got that grammar and now we're understanding it. Think about what we're going to do for mathematics. That's what gets me really exciting is, as a former classroom teacher, right, for mathematics, I saw the burden we put on students to acquire grammar and turn around and apply that grammar all in the same day. Wondered why kids struggled, right? And here we are, we're giving them the opportunity to classically study math, acquire over time, practicing it, and then use those dialectic arts to ask those questions and develop understanding. I'm really excited about that. So
I think also, Kirsty, it's because we're kind of equipping them with the language of math. I think it's going to affect logic in the reasoning strand in Challenge B. And like for me, I did Challenge 3 twice, and really I felt so ill-equipped to integrate the math into the math in motion with music. And I just think it's gonna, like, the fruit isn't gonna be in one place like math. I think we're just gonna see it like exponentially.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I was also thinking, yes, just long term, right? The reintroduction of being able to use the beauty of math to the cathedrals, the symphonies, the trips to the moon, all like that long term, like, oh, this doesn't intimidate us at all or as much anymore. And then applying it and integrating it into all the beauty that we can apply it to.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, just the opportunity for connections. And I think too, not only, for those of us who have directed higher levels and been in those conversations, but also just in that one room family experience of having those older students sitting at the table with their younger brother or sister, and the excitement I think that's going to be generated, not only for the older kids to get to share what they know, but for those younger kids to be excited about where they're headed to. And then as they're going off into college, and I see this with my my two girls in college right now, their experience of how they look at the world is so different for having done CC, and how much more once this is in place for our students coming up, just what they're going to be able to share and how they're going to represent to the world the beauty and the goodness and the truth of Christ, because all of this has just become part of who they are, and to be able to communicate that is going to be amazing.
Right. I'm going to take just a minute and talk about the fact that we only look at pages 1 through 4. At home, I would encourage you to take your complex, if you are a copy, or both, and compare pages 1, 5, 9, and 13. Then compare pages 2, 6, 10, and 14. Then 3, 7, 11, and 15, and then 4, 8, 12, and 16. And notice that there are 4 sets of 4 pages. They are not always going to be perfect. Some weeks, just because of the nature of what we were doing, maybe was a little bit different. But by and large, pages 1, 5, 9, and 13 are covering the same types of topics. And so if we went through 1 through 4 today, you've seen examples of what the other pages are going to look like, right? 2, 6, 10, and 14 are going to match up. 3, 7, 11, and 15 are going to match up. 4, 8, 12, and 16 are going to match up. And so what that does is it creates the opportunity in your homeschool to introduce all of the key ideas on day 1, and then go back and practice those ideas over days 2, 3, and 4. And then day 5 is your community day. So we have structured the math map specifically for classical conversations communities, which I think is going to be a blessing. And there are 30 weeks that line up with the 30 weeks of challenge. And so can I just get, sort of a hallelujah, because when you finish challenge, you will be finished with math. You will not be continuing on into the summer months trying to finish up math.
When do we do the so before page 1, there's the Roman numeral 1 with the little exponent 1.
Yes.
When do we do that?
So those are, there are other pages, right? So that you have your Exordium that you're going to lead in class or at home using the cover elements. Each week you can take a look with that math map, and yeah, you're not ever really going to be finished with math, Jana, sorry, but the booklets, right, and the homework you can be finished with. Sorry about that. And then there are those 2 pages that if you haven't seen the complex, you haven't seen these yet, but we have what we call the frames of the booklet, and those frames are there to frame those lesson pages too, right? Just like if you have a piece of art and you put a beautiful frame about it, it enhances the artwork. The frames are there to enhance the experience with the lesson pages, and that includes the games, that includes the cover, it includes the careful calculations pages that are more like a drill. They're not really a drill sheet, but they're going to feel more like a drill sheet than the lesson pages do. And then these other 2 pages that take the ideas and help to pull concepts from across the weeks together. And we call them invention and memoria and arrangement, to generate conversations about 5 common topics, and how we can use those to understand math more deeply, as well as how we use our memoria and then arrangement to understand things. So there's a lot more pieces you can't see. Yes.
About those pieces that you're talking about, being a PSS, I do have a copy of Complex, and it looks amazing, and I love being able to compare it with the naturals that we have access to. But for everybody else that only has access to the naturals lesson pages, once the companion guide is available on CC Connected, will it also have those frames and charts and things that people can use for the naturals?
Yes, they will not be there for the naturals until the naturals is, but they would be able to look there for complex through the companion. So if they want to see those pages, yeah.
Do you have any suggestions in terms of when do we use, could we have 16 pages and 4 pages a week? So we have 4 days and 1 day is community day. Do you think that maybe Saturday and Sunday we'll pull out our frame pages and do it with the students? And how do we do that? Like, I'm just thinking on the ground, what do we do on the ground?
Absolutely. So I just want to acknowledge that your time is valuable. It is 2 o'clock. I will answer these last couple of questions. But if you need to jump off, you've got the big ideas from this week. I'll finish up here. And I just wanted to, somebody said, is it every 2 weeks? The book club, if that question is about the book club, it will be every week, every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So, and bring questions because we will be happy to answer your questions. Back to what does this look like at home? At home, there are so many ways to use this curriculum in your homeschool that every family will probably look a little bit different. One of the things that Leigh really likes to say is to use the book and not to let the book use you. So some students may do really well, and they may go lesson pages 1 through 16, and they have time for flashcards, and they spend time on the weekends, right? You may find that some students just want to do it all. Other students, you may need to tailor by saying, okay, we're going to do 15 minutes with flashcards, and we're going to do 30 minutes with our lesson pages, and then we're going to play the game, right? And maybe you don't get through all 4 lesson pages. Maybe you save those lesson pages for when you're on break or over the summer to come back and review. The frames may be something that your student interacts with in their parent uses to prepare yourself at home, especially if you have younger students. So the expectation isn't necessarily that every family uses every part of every booklet every week, but that we're trying to equip you to feel that you can pull out what you need to meet the needs of your student. And that'll take a little while, right? Because we're used to our math book saying, do this example, work these problems. And that's one of our goals, is to be able to provide support to you as you figure out what best fits your family. Because we want students to love math, and we want you to love math. And so that's why each family may look a bit different, and I can't give a perfect answer. All right, are there other questions here that did not get answered? So if your question didn't get answered, go ahead and speak up and I'll answer it.
I did have a question about errors. If we're finding errors, do you still want us to submit them, or do you have a plethora of errors and you just need to get them dealt with and not overwhelm you, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. No, we are happy. You would not believe how many people have edited the curriculum and how diligently we have looked for errors and then still found some even after it was sent to print. And then we all mourn, because how could we have missed that? But we are absolutely willing to take those. You can email those to the math map at classicalsolutions.com, and they will go to the math map team and they will check to see if somebody else has caught that or if it's already been fixed. And we will get that done. So yes, please go ahead and send those in.
Kirsty, one question I saw, and I mean, I'll tell you what I said, but they asked if there was going to be new memory work that would go along with new grammar. And I said no, because these are more of symbols. And I don't know that you could put that in a song.
Well, maybe Babs, you could write a
okay.
Yeah, at this point,
I want to hear Babs sing.
Yeah.
I think communities will be making songs. I really do.
Probably. At this point, the foundation memory work will not be changing. It is separate to what we're doing, and while it complements it, the two things will not, won't change. The math map won't be changing what's being done in foundations. So any songs that exist for the foundation's memory work will continue. Are there gifted moms out there who will write songs to go along with things that they are studying in the math map? I would imagine that we will see those songs being published. We, at this time, don't have any plans from the math map team to write and publish such songs, but we look forward to hearing what you guys come up with.
So my question is just to clarify. So the naturals, which is what incoming challenge students, parents are seeing online, is for much younger children, right? So that's not what their challenge students will be working on.
Correct. What the complex level will look like is very different in terms of the font size, the exercise complexity, and the types of numbers that they're using, but that will be the same. And so that is why we're really encouraging everybody that the best preparation for working through the challenge level is to complete the naturals level. And Babs and Jill, who have both been tutors in the pilot, every year they say you can absolutely tell the students that have worked through the naturals materials before working on the complex. But I can also tell you that my student, and things have been edited, but one of my students was working on essentially what has become the naturals level. It was less simplified at the time, but he was working on that a few years ago, and I heard him explaining to my mother how a function worked, just based off of the work that he was doing in the naturals level. So I say that if you have an older student who's working through the naturals, they're going to get things and ideas and concepts from that work that will surprise you, even though it seems to be very basic and simplistic.
And us as parents, right? We're going to get more from it too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end us there. If you have more questions that can't wait till next week, you can always email the math map at classicalconversations.com. We have a great support team that can help answer those questions, or join us again next week at 1 o'clock for lessons 3 and 4, and bring your questions and invite your friends.